Good morning friends, you are most welcome to Civil Affairs channel. Here we will discuss Social Anthropology by MAAN IGNOU, in which we will discuss Comparative ethnography MANE003, and our topic is family. Contents are introduction part, then we will discuss theoretical part, of which the ethnography, family and kinship. A study of the Pandits of rural Kashmir is an example. Then we will discuss description of the ethnography. There are four parts: intellectual context, fieldwork, analysis of data, and conclusion. Then discuss how does the ethnography advance our understanding, and then we will discuss theoretical part, of which the ethnography, Himalayan polyandry, structure, functioning, and culture change. A field study of Jonsar Bawar is an example. Then we will discuss description of the ethnography, in which there are four parts: intellectual context, fieldwork, analysis of data, and conclusion. Then we will discuss how does the ethnography advance our understanding. At the last we will discuss the summary. Learning objectives are: in this unit, based on two ethnographic accounts, the students will be able to understand the complexity on which the family is based, peculiar form of family, functioning of the family, and comparative perspective vis-a-vis one's own family. Introduction part. The first example in this is on the Kashmiri Pandits, written by T.N. Madan. It is a good example of a study that was carried out in one's own society. In contemporary terms, it is an example of auto-ethnography, but it may be noted that Madan did not study his own village. He stationed himself in a different village and carried out his study using the standard anthropological methods. Thus, for him, the Kashmiri Pandits were the other culture. Later, reflecting on his work and his writings on Kashmiri Pandits, Madan says that the frame of mind he adopted was defamiliarization, making the familiar things strange and then carrying out its study. In the same way as anthropologists have studied the other cultures qualitatively different from their own. Theoretical part, of which the ethnography, family and kinship, a study of the Pandits of rural Kashmir, is an example. This work is a contribution to the understanding of a household process in time, like in the famous work of Mayor Forties on the Ashanti and Talensi of Ghana. Madan also incorporates the element of time in his analysis, how the household changes over a period of time. Description of the ethnography, intellectual context, family and kinship, a study of Pandits in rural Kashmir, a pioneering and ethnographically rich account of the Indian family, is considered to be a classic study in Indian anthropology and sociology. It is probably the only study of its kind on the traditional Pandits' life in rural Kashmir. In this book, Madans made an in-depth study of family and kinship among the Pandits, the Saraswat Brahmins of a village called Utrassu-Umanagri in rural South Kashmir. In this work, the author has tried to determine the structure and function of domestic groups, their interrelation with other groups, and how kinship served as a mechanism of organizing social activities and coordinating social relations. Primarily, Madan's study concentrates on the patrilineal household chulha, which is the most important kin unit in Pandit society. The book comprises 11 chapters. Several chapters are devoted to the structure and functioning of the household, covering such aspects like size and composition, recruitment to the household, economic functions, and processes underlying growth and partition. Madan's analysis of Kashmiri Pandits reveals that there are no formal social groups or associations, and there is a lack of solidarity among them at the village level. They do not act as a social group within the village. The only significant groups found among the Pandits are those based on kinship. Even here, patrilineally organized domestic units are significant than affinally related households, non-agnatic cognates. On the other hand, kinship institutions have no role in politico-jural functions, Its relevance is largely limited to the domain of domestic relations. A greater part of study deals with chulha, domestic group, kotam or kutumb, the extended family, and kul, the exogamous patrilineal kind groups. Fieldwork: Madan has consciously chosen to study one's own society in order that anthropology expands its scope from studying primitive tribal societies and other cultures. Madan took a position that a proper understanding of the subject is possible firstly by conducting intensive field studies to collect first-hand information and analysis of that information. Fieldwork was conducted from January 1957 to January 1958 in Utrassu-Umanagri. He made brief week-long visits to five other villages. Utrassu-Umanagri was selected due to its representativeness of other rural Kashmiri villages, its relative isolation unaffected by disturbances, and the presence of sufficiently large number of Pandit populations and households. Because of its representative features, the results of this study hold good or good for family system among Brahmins of rural Kashmir. Next heading is analysis of data. Madan has employed the following methods for data collection: sociological census, interviews, genealogy, family history and biography, and participant observation. He employed a structural functional approach in the analysis of the data. Madan held the view that the structural approach fails to take into consideration time is not necessarily true, for he felt that defining social position in terms of behavioral sequences consume time and happen on a time scale, and relationships can be conceptualized only from successive repetitive actions. Basic premises: Madan elaborately gives a preamble to his study emphasizing conceptual background and several analytical premises which shaped the study process right from conceiving the data, data collection and analysis. Some of these premises are listed below. First, Madan assumes a position that Hindu family and kinship can be studied as separate analytical categories without viewing from without viewing them as embedded realms in the larger domain of caste, and not necessarily equating social structure with that of the caste system. Second, Madan opines that too much reliance on Sanskrit text in the study of caste and kinship has led to the neglect of the study of Hindu kinship as it is in the villages, and acted as blight on the growth of field studies. Madan holds the view that family and kinship in village India need not be organized and functioning on the basis of scriptures, as the Pandit happened to be only Hindu caste in Kashmir villages. Madan treats caste as a neutral factor. Pandits of Utrasu Managri, the community and the village. The community studied by Madan belongs to Saraswat Brahmins, one of the two subdivisions of the Puranic division of God Brahmins of North India. The Saraswat Brahmins constitute the great majority of native Hindus in Kashmir. They are popularly known as Kashmiri Pandits. The village studied by Madan is called Utrasu Managri, located in the Kothar Valley in Anantnag district. It is a binucleated village. The village is inhabited by the Pandits and Muslims only. This study focuses exclusively on Pandits. There were 431 homesteads in the village with the population of 2644 persons, of which 59 and 522 were Pandit homestead and Pandit population respectively. The remaining households belongs to the Muslims. The Kashmiri Pandits. Kashmiri Pandits comprised two subcastes, namely the Gaur or Basha Batta and the Karkun. The Gaur performed priestly activities, whereas the Karkun have taken up secular occupations. The latter consider themselves the latter consider themselves superior than the former in the Pandit caste hierarchy. These two subdivisions came into existence over a period of time by means of occupational specialization, endogamy, and discrimination of social status between the two subdivisions. Even though the subcaste and internal divisions within Karkun comprise important structural features of the Pandit society, the domestic groups play a major role in their life. In Pandit society, functionally as well as structurally, important groups are first domestic groups called Gare, that is household, or Chulha, that is hearth group, also identified as household, which comprises the former. Second is a wider group comprising chulhas called Kotam ya Kutum, family, usually extended family. Third is Kol, patrilineage, which link the constituent domestic groups Gara or Chulha by the rule of agnatic descent. These three groups are the important sites for the operation of kinship ties and affinal rules. Pandit kinship ties lay emphasis on agnation. Non-agnatic cognates fall outside one's own agnatic groups, as can be seen in case of Havur, Havur, wife's natal family, which remain forever in the category of non-kin. Wife's conjugal family is also her family of procreation. The homestead and household. The Pandits call homestead Jay, which consists of a house with a yard and kitchen garden and one or more outbuildings used as cattle shed or granary or a shop, etc. Granaries and cattle sheds are also shared by the neighboring homesteads. A house of a homestead is called lar, a building which is normally three-storied and comprises about 12 rooms. The house is inhabited by chulha household. The number of residents chulhas in a house varies. However, a house can accommodate not more than 4 chulhas at a time, as a typical Pandit house can have a maximum of 4 kitchens and each chulha must have one kitchen. Even though the number of households residing in a house vary, the common type or the common type is one household in one house. The variance in the number of households per house is the result of social events like partition, shifting to new and or other houses, a rare migration, marriage, etc., which cause increase or decrease in the number of households per houses. Madan's interest is studying. Madan's interest in studying domestic groups lies in explaining the significance of the range in the numerical size of the chulha, the variation in its genealogical structure. He applies the development cycle approach based on diachronic data to analyze the above issues. Madan uses several examples to draw the general characteristics of the household development cycle and possibilities of the structural varieties within the household. First is the Pandit kinship system distinguishes the jural and ritual position of male and female agnates. Patri local residence entails jural rights on the daughter but not ritual rights. Usually a daughter takes residence in her husband's house and foregoes her jural and ritual statuses and acquires the right of maintenance. Widow daughter can return to her natal family and are entitled to the right of maintenance but not to jural or ritual rights. Her ritual rights continue to exist in her deceased husband's family. Male agnates of the family are co-parceners, co-parceners of the ancestral property without any recognition of definite shares, as the father is considered the authoritative custodian and as long as he is alive. Property remains undivided. Structurally, these jural rules are significant in the sense that the family is quite likely for partition once the father dies. Basing on the above two rules which govern the Pandit family, the emergence of various possible structural family units in the development process can be discerned. The development cycle of household largely depends upon the number of sons or only one son and number of daughters or childless widow daughters. A family survived by only one son would take a biological course and its subsequent phases depend upon birth and death. If a family is survived by more than one son, partition results, though not invariably, leading the brothers to establish separate households. Marriages also lead to the fission of the household. In the absence of sons, adoption or adoption also leads to the biological course where subsequent birth, death, marriage, etc. in the descending generations influences the emergence of different family types. If a son is not adopted, the family may perish or the daughters may inherit the property, but her or their father's line of descent comes to an end. The family composition also changes as the household's development cycle phases changes. Several types of household compositions are seen in the village, of which more popular types are nuclear, fraternal, extended family, siblings siblings and first cousins, and paternal extended family. Even though Pandits regard the extended family as ideal, in reality the Chulha's composition is differently constituted. Nevertheless, the data from 6 villages, including Utrassu-Umanagri, show that numerically preponderant type is the extended family. Recruitment to the household. It is through birth, adoption, marriage, and incorporation that individuals become members of the Pandit household. Membership enables exercise of rights and obligations and facilitates renewal, new roles and individuals into persons. Of the 522 Pandit persons in the village, 71% became members in Pandit society by birth, 25.5% by marriage, 2.5% by adoption, 1% by incorporation. Our next heading is parent-child relationship. Ideally, parent-child relationship is governed by hawaliyat, preordination, and command of moral law. It is dharma, moral and religious duty, to beget children and bring them up, and it is again dharma to love and respect one's parents. This reciprocal relationship ensures continuation of lineage, transfer of property, performing rituals of food offering and libation to their manes, etc. Even though conflicts do occur between parents and children, they are rarely very intensive. Religious rites, for example, Sarir Samaskar, Sharir Samskar, Sarir Samskar, ritual for good of the body, Sarir Sanskar, rituals for the good of the body, strengthens parent-child relationship. Particularly, sons acquire full membership by means of undergoing various rituals. For example, Mekhal, that is ritual initiation. Another important ritual is Antim Samskar, last rituals or last rites. Food offering, Shraddha, is performed for one's lineage or lineal ascendants of 6 generations. This ritual strengthens the bonds between parent and children and ensures continuity of the household. Grandparents, parents, and children constitute 3 important categories of relatives in the household. with the mutual rights and obligations, the economic aspects of the household. Madan considers economic aspects of the household in conjunction with its influence on the development cycle. The income sources are multiple to a majority of Pandit household. Land, salaried employment, wage labor, and trade are the main source of income. Income from all sources is pooled and held as joint income. Madan writes, to the extent to which individual earnings are not an important part of the household income, the solidarity of the joint household is maintained without much difficulty. An individual earner usually remits a part of his salary or wages to the joint household as a matter of duty and kinship sentiment. There are certain situations where an individual earner willingly continues his membership of the joint household instead of establishing a separate family at the place of work. However, at some point of time, particularly when the household is in the development phase of the fraternal extended family, the individual earner may refuse to remit salary or wages, which leads to household fission. Household property is jointly owned by the corpusner by the co-partners with equal rights. It is managed by the eldest person, Karta, who is main decision maker by virtue of his structural position as a lineal ascendant of other co-partners. The household property is divided when the other members develop difference of opinion between themselves or with the Karta. No co-partner has exclusive rights in the joint estate. Therefore, each co-partner has no heirs but only survivors who will have joint property rights. Property shared between the co-partners at the time of partition. Economic conditions have witnessed over time various changes, devaluation of landed property due to land reforms, enrollment as laborers, outmigration to take up employment, increased dependence and individual efforts to work as employees, laborers, servants, etc., and cash income. These changes have had implication for the maintenance of household solidarity. Partition of the household. Ideally, the Pandit society provides appreciations to joint living. When father is alive, his sons rarely embark on partition of the household. Households are prone to divide after the demise of the father. Besides, Pandit household do not expand over and above three generations. As the data indicate, joint household do not contain kin more distantly related than first cousins. Household with members spanning over three or four generations and kin extensions beyond first cousin are very few in number. Death and partition are the factors that prevent expansion of the above said limits. In a majority of the households, partition take place between married brothers, of which one or more brothers had children, father and son dividing. The household is also reported, though rare. In Pandit society, the sons remain subdued under the moral and jural authority of the father. In the event of partition, the father is entitled for a share and also sole right on self acquired property, whereby the share of the seceding sons can be substantially reduced. The consideration which make a son or sons not to opt for partition. There are at least two structural conditions under which a household is quite likely to undergo partition: father's death and setting up of own household by getting married. However, these structural conditions by themselves are not the causes of partition. The major cause is the conflicts that arises between brothers In due course, after the death of father and also mother, the eldest son succeeded or succeeds as head of joint family, and his younger brothers may not quite likely accept him in the position of their father, and the oldest son is also under the obligations of showing his loyalty to his own wife and children, quite contrary to the way father functioned before his death. The sister-in-law also find a situation of confusion regarding their rights and duties in the household. Sometimes partial partitioning occurs where the immovable property is held jointly, but the chulas is divided for separate residences and consumption. Conflict between brothers on one hand and one's bondage with wife and children on the other is usually resolved by partition. However, the ties of agnation and territorial proximity bind the household of brothers and patrilineal related cousins. Our next heading is the family and the patrilineage. The family and the patrilineage. The natal members of a Pandit household have their patrilineal kin living either in another or other households. All such agnatically tied households are termed kotumb or kutumb. It is larger than a small group of closely related members in a chulha, and each kutumb comprises a grouping of chulhas. When partition of a household occurs over a period of time, the necessity to construct new houses also arises to accommodate the closely related agnates. New houses are usually constructed nearby the ancestral house, around the same yard, homestead, or in adjacent yards. Such close by constraints or constructions are necessarily in order to use outbuildings, yard, kitchen, garden, or granary, which has usually remained undivided. These newly constructed houses around the ancestral house become a cluster in course of time and become a compound. A compound comprises two or four homesteads, a house with a yard, kitchen, garden, and outbuildings of agnatically related households. In course of time, new homesteads also come up adjacent to the previously existing homesteads, which together may form a neighborhood. The homesteads also form into compounds or independent homesteads within the neighborhood. Households with the same kutum name live in compounds and neighborhood, forming into a unilocal extended family. Kutum sometimes are dispersed in more than one locality, neighborhood, separated sufficiently so that face-to-face interaction between Kutum members gets diminished. However, the Kutum members act together in contingent situations like death. Even though they are dispersed, they feel the togetherness as belonging to the same extended family kutum, irrespective of how remotely related. The chulhas of agnatically related kin dwelling in a single village constitute one single kutum. The kutum members observe ritual pollution when one of their own members is polluted due to an event of birth or death in his house. Distantly related members and dispersed members may not take active association and regard themselves as belonging to the same kol or gotra rather than the same kutum. A kol is the widest patrilineal exogamous category. Kol brings out the significance of the patrilineage and agnation by providing kinship connections between the households in a kutum, notwithstanding the structural connections that marriage, filiation, and vicinage generate in the formation of a kutum. Kol establishes kin connection between members who are not members of one's own chula or kutum but distantly related by virtue of belonging to the same kol of an ego. It is not, however, a structural group like a chula, but an ad hoc gathering in a wedding or funeral. Either the Kul or the Kutum have no role in the political jural arena. All the economic rituals and jural function falls within the chula. The patrilineal kin are bound together by observing birth and death pollution, coal exogamy and offering food and water to the mains, which the morality of agnatic kinship enforces. Performing Shraddha is limited to the common sixth lineal male ascendants, signifying that the Pandit patrilineage or Kul extends up to six generations of ancestors. Confining to the above activities, the Kul serves the purpose of sharing the affecting continuity in the family life. Coal is a recognizable agnatic kinship category, and beyond coal, the Pandit kinship enters into the domain mythical descent. The family and wide kinship structure. Affinity and non-agnatic kin are also fundamental to Pandit kinship, though the primacy of agnation never subdues. Pandit kinship is characterized by the presence of three categories of kin, namely, first egos affines, second egos agnates, third egos maternal and other cognates. However, these three relationships are maintained as discrete categories by rules of exogamy and preference in spouse selection. The third category is called matamal, which is generally used as one's mother's natal chulha. The matamal has a special place in the life of the children of its matamal's female agnates. Example, that is females who are married into another chulha. It occasionally presents gifts to the young children. Though rare, a child whose parents are dead is fostered. Matamal is like a holiday inn to the children of its married female daughters. Conclusion. Madan has studied the family and kinship of rural Kashmiri Pandits in a village called Utrassu-Umanagri. Pandits' social organization and culture remain insulated from the co-residence of Muslim and no other Hindu caste are reported here. The Pandit and the Muslim relations are limited only to economic interactions. Brahmins of rural Kashmir elsewhere lack formal groups other than kin groups which instill solidarity and organized action at wider community level. Madan attributes territorial division and subtle class formation for these features of Pandit societies. The kin groups are the only groups that play major role in organizing the Pandit's life. Kin groups are fundamentally patrilineal groups. A hamlet or a village comprise two or more patrilineal groupings of kin, some of whom may be related by affinity or cognatic kinship. However, agnates, affines, and non-agnatic cognates do not fuse or associate by means of common interest like joint membership or ownership of property, common hearth, and daily interactions. Patrilineally related kin form into cohesive and functional kin units. Patrilineally related kin form into cohesive and functional kin units. However, kin units do not have politico-jural functions on the wider scale beyond one's own domestic groups. The relevance of kinship institutions is strictly limited to the domain of domestic relations. The most basic and fundamental kin groups in the Pandit society is chulha or the household. It is based on patrilineal ideology usually characterized by patrivirilocal residence and patrilineal inheritance. The oldest male members of the household is the head. The chula may have different member composition giving rise to nuclear family, paternal extended family or fraternal extended family depending upon The phase of the development cycle of the household. The chula is an estate holding group where the natal male members are the co-parsonaries, worshipping gods and offering obligations to the ancestors of the household constitute an integral functions of the chula. In all the above, the principle of agnation is thrown into relief. The principle of agnation is applied differently to men and women. In Pandit society, ritual adulthood for a man is conferred in his own natal family. Ritual adulthood is acquired by a woman only after her marriage, and it is recognized in conjunction with other members of her conjugal family, however, with limited rights. This way, a woman becomes a permanent member of her conjugal family and ceases to be a member of her natal family, losing her co-parsonary rights. Co-parsonary rights save some payments and presents during marriage and periodic or occasional gifts. She is entitled for maintenance if joined her natal family after husband's bear bereavement and childlessness. A widow's residence in her natal family does not entail jural and ritual ties there. These ties are located in her conjugal family even though the widow is no longer its resident. Pandits distinguish Jamati natal members and Amati unmarried members. Due to this division, the women married into the Pandit's Chula has only limited rights in her conjugal family. She is not a co-partner of the household estate. However, a woman attains functional importance in running and organizing the affairs of the household. Agnatically related groupings of chulhas are called kutams, an extended family. It is a segmentary grouping emerging owing to partition of chulha. The kutum comprise patrilineal kin living in separate household within the village or neighboring villages. The kutum as such does not own any property in common. As the chulha increases in size and due to birth, marriage and death, new chulhas emerge, but the agnatic relations are kept alive. Joint ownership may exist between two or three chulhas. The kutam as one single unit does not have economic or ritual obligations towards its individual members. However, the individual members of kutam, an account of proximity of residence or unbroken contact, observe rituals, pollution, and ritual offering to means. In reality, active interaction is limited to brothers and first cousins, and vicinage strengthens kinship bonds between them. Wider than Kutum is the Kul, an exogamous category of patrilineage. The linkage between the constituent chulhas of the Kutum is effected by this patrilineage. Kul ties are invoked with distant kin of no genealogical connection but fallen outside the chulha or kutum. The genealogical knowledge itself does not exceed the limits of fifth degree cousinship, as the Pandits do not evince much interest in preserving the Kul genealogy, just as Kutum, the Kul also does not have political jural functions. How does the ethnography advance our understanding? T.N. Madan's work is one of the most significant work on Indian kinship and family system, incorporating the element of time. Madan shows how the Pandit household develops. Our next heading is theoretical part of which the ethnography, Himalayan polyandry structure, functioning and culture change, a field study of John Sarbauer is an example. Thank you very much. We will discuss it further.